Well, hey, like I said, appreciate you having me on, Jake. I just hit my 1 year anniversary on Warpcast about a week ago. And so, that's been a really fun journey that was really kind of kicked off by seeing some folks on crypto Twitter talking about Farcaster. So I guess kind of bringing it back to the beginning. I'm somebody who's had an interest in investing and personal finance for a long time. Predates my investing in crypto. A lot of times was looking for tech opportunities and things like that within public equities. As I've lived in California now for closing in on 10 years, at one juncture, I had the opportunity to take a roll up in San Francisco, and I think that's really kind of what kickstarted my crypto journey. Going from somebody who was interested in tech and investing to being in a place that had a lot of people that were interested in crypto and are already starting to invest there and well ahead of me in the mid 2010s trenches, if you will, which were quite a bit different than today. And so kind of started off like a lot of people do, interested in Bitcoin mainly, kind of bought in on the digital gold narrative. And that's obviously played out pretty well. And then, through the years, you start to go down the risk curve a little bit. You start off maybe just holding Ethereum. Then the next thing I knew, I was flipping NFTs like a crazy person, and then hopping on Solana, and then obviously in our most recent past year or so here, it's been pretty meme coin heavy. For me personally, I don't try to get too deep into that from a percentage of investment standpoint. But when you're tracking trends and you're trying to place some money and things like that, you gotta take what the market gives you to some degree as well. So that's kind of just a very brief overview on sort of what brought me to Farcaster. And then coming there, I was thinking, oh, I'm just gonna, similar to Twitter, which I'd been on since I think 2011, just kind of yell into the void about crypto once every couple weeks, and we'll kind of see from there. And so it's been a pleasant surprise to see just how interactive everybody is and being able to build a lot of great personal relationships. So it's been a ton of fun, to say the least.
Nice. Yeah, I feel very similarly to you about, in regards to my experience on Farcaster, and it's been cool. I feel like I've gotten to get familiar with your posts over the last, like, I don't know, maybe 3 months, something like that, like more recently. So it's not super surprising for me to hear you've been on for about a year. And I've sort of come to associate your profile with a couple of things, and that's food and basketball. On the food side, you've got posts like, I think what's your streak is like since streaks were invented or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I go back to day one of streaks. What is it now? It's 236, 237 days, something like that.
237, but who's counting? But
Yeah,
I think it's got to be one of the only streaks of its kind. So it's really impressive, and I see these photos and like they stand out to me because like they look tasty. They look like generally pretty healthy. Maybe not like the pizza pics, but
yeah.
like it's a vibe of food that is very aligned with sort of the way that I eat, where there's some like I think the trending term was like boy meals in there, which is like something very simple that you put together for yourself, and it's like maybe doesn't look incredibly impressive, but it's like got all the main staples, and then you've got some stuff in there that is a little bit more gourmet, I'd say, a little bit. It's got a little fanciness to it, and then you've got the pizza, of course, which resonates deeply with me. So it's a good array of food. Was there something that made you like sort of start with that and persist with that, or just started posting meals and couldn't stop?
Yeah, it's really just that dopamine, right? It's actually kind of funny because I was always kind of anti-food pictures. I'd be the one at the table kind of grumbling as someone's like, "Oh, hang on a second, let me take a pic." And I'm like, "Oh, just put the damn camera down and let's dig in." And then I can't remember when I started posting in food originally on Farcaster, but a lot of people, everybody likes to eat food. People like different cuisines and things like that. So just the way that you mentioned about pizza, I'll be chatting with Rodu and some other people about dumplings, and we've got like it's some inside jokes there. So it's I've always enjoyed eating well, or I guess I shouldn't say always. It really kind of kicked off more so when I started to live in California, just because there were so many more cuisines available. But the food posting itself, I think it was just people responded to it, and I'm the kind of person who likes to adventure out in a lot of different cuisines, and folks seem to like to chat about it and share some of their own experiences with food, and so I kind of took to it, and here we are, 2/3 of a year later, still keeping it rolling.
Yeah, it's I hope that it lives on as long as streaks remain a thing. I don't know, like I don't see a whole lot of long streaks these days, so I'm a little worried they might rug you on the streaks function overall, and you might just sort of go day one to sunset on the streaks feature. But there should be some kind of, there's these Warpcast rewards payouts. There should be, if you go from day one to sunset on streaks, there's probably, you might be the only person, but then there's a few more, but like that deserves a payout, I think, in excess of what people are getting for the weekly Warpcast rewards.
Yeah, I agree. We'll get DWR in on that just to make sure that we get that solidified in the very near future. No,
Exactly.
just kidding on that. But yeah, you know what? Streaks kind of kept me in it a bit when I was feeling a little bit of exhaustion. I think kind of came into Warpcast and sort of sat on my username for a couple months. Like I said, I maybe threw like a couple casts out there, and it's like, oh, no one's responding to this. It's like, well, you don't have any followers. Of course, nobody is. And then kind
Right.
of went more of the reply guy route where, you're just hammering out replies. And like, it was a ton of fun. That's when, DGen's popping off and going crazy. So you're making money, you're having fun with your friends and all that good stuff. But, as you're sitting there on your phone all day, which, is something I'm sure you can resonate with. I've been following as you've kind of been putting these rules together on really lowering the amount of time you spend on your phone, which I think is super cool. But
Right.
you hit points of exhaustion. And so that hit me maybe late last year, where I was a little burned out on being able to just kind of hit it the way you want to really be active on a platform. And so, credit to Dan and the team, those streaks, there was something mentally where I couldn't quite let my streak go. So food was kind of what kept me in it. And then, you get re-energized, and just been trying to kind of diversify my posting and get back to kind of the reply guy roots and just having some fun.
Yeah, it's nice. I feel like with the food posting, there's an automatic like sort of cue every day. Like you don't have to think of something, because sometimes you go through these droughts where it's just like, man, I'm not really feeling the social media stuff right now. Like I just kind of want to put my phone away and not really don't feel like I have much to say. But if it's just a food pick, then every day you're going to eat, and so there's always something. And maybe I don't know if it's led you to eating even a little bit better or having at least one good meal a day, but it's like sort of it's a nice baseline for your Farcaster activity, like you said, where even when you're sort of in a posting trough, you can still get away with a food pick every day.
Absolutely. And there's probably been some times where it's okay, I could maybe throw something together real quick, but okay, I gotta tend to the streak, so let me go run out and grab a little something and take a pick for all the mutuals.
Nice. So are you still in San Francisco area now or elsewhere in California?
I'm in LA now.
LA. That's a good food scene.
Yeah, it definitely is. Anytime. Are you in New York, Jake?
I'm in Miami.
In Miami, nice.
But I'm from up by New York, so
okay.
As are more familiar with New York than Miami.
Nice. So you're familiar with a very abundant food scene as well, which San Francisco is and LA is, but it's just fun to be able to explore little sub pockets within your particular area that are better than others. So when you look at LA, for example, we've got a huge Koreatown, so we've got an incredible Korean food here versus if you look at something like Miami, where obviously you guys are lapping the field when it comes to something like Cuban food or Caribbean food, and amongst
Right.
other things too. So it's, I think that for me is something that's very fun as well, with traveling for work or for pleasure. And if it is for work, it's okay, you're kind of grinding out through the day, but let me find a cool local spot that's kind of highlighting maybe a cuisine that isn't as readily available where I am. Or maybe, I mean, everything's kind of readily available in a big enough city, but maybe just not to the quality, to the extent at the place you're visiting.
Yeah, I've been really pleasantly surprised with Miami food scene. There's just there's a lot of really, really good food. And I've been also surprised though with the, it's very expensive. Like I'll visit New York now and get the bill on dinner and be pleasantly surprised because it's actually lower than like what I've become accustomed to for like going to a nice restaurant in Miami. It's really weird. I don't know why that is or if it's just my experience or whatever. I think New York also has the full spectrum from, a dollar slice to
Mm-hmm.
Michelin star or whatever. And Miami, it's like there's like fast food and some crap, and then there's the nicer restaurants just tend to be pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not as much of like that in between range, which is like abundant in New York. But yeah, I've been, I've never like lived in LA, but I have visited, a number of times, and I've liked what I've seen from the food scene out there. I like LA in general, and I don't know if it's last time I was there, or a time before that, I went to John and Vinny's for the first time. They've
Yeah.
got a pop up in Miami. I'm actually going on Friday, so excited for that.
Awesome.
I love the LA one. I don't know, the Miami one seems like it's a little bit of like a cafeteria vibe, so I'm not too sure about that, but
Hmm.
yeah, I like that out in LA. Do you have we'll expand beyond the food topic shortly, but as maybe a final question on it, do you have any local favorites or personal favorites when it comes to like types of food or certain dishes or local LA favorites in terms of like specific spots?
Oh yeah, and I think that's where sometimes as I'm food posting, I'm like, okay, is this getting a little redundant? Me posting this breakfast burrito that I'm getting like once a week. Um, but kind of similar to our point earlier, it's kind of just, hey, here's what I'm eating today. But yeah, I love to frequent local spots versus kind of like the chains. Which, hey, nothing wrong with that. I'll go to a good chain spot too. But so around LA, I would say that I think the brunch scene around here is incredible. I really love Republique, which won a James Beard Award for bakery and
Mm,
pastry in 2023. So that's definitely on more of the high end, or if you're looking for more of a mid-tier meal from a price perspective, something like Clark Street Diner, I think is excellent as well. Um, some of the local spots around here are very strong as well. I mentioned Dialogue earlier, where I tend to get the breakfast burritos, or but then similar to what you're saying about having hole in the wall spots, I think those are becoming more and more of a dying breed. But I think in LA, there's some pretty good Mexican spots, hole in the wall wise. So like Tacos Via Corona is probably my favorite breakfast burrito in the city. And
mm.
if you don't
What
add
part of
anything
town?
on, that's over in Atwater Village on the east side.
Okay.
And so if you just get a run of the mill burrito there, it's going to run you like $6 or $7. Like that's pretty hard to come by these days. And it's really good too, and it's quick. So, similar to you, I like to kind of mix it up and go kind of up and down the gamut. I would say that one of the things I've been really high on lately has been Korean barbecue. I've kind of just had that kick lately. My favorite spot in the city is Chosun Galbi, but there's a ton of good ones in K Town. And as you've seen from my posts, I'm definitely a pizza guy. I was a little sad to see Farina Pizza in K Town cease to exist about a year ago or so, which was a real go-to of mine. But John and Vinny's is great. Prime's really good. Apollonia's is very good. So LA not necessarily known for pizza, but there's definitely good pizza to be had.
Yeah, I feel like all of these maybe not all of them, but a lot of these tier one cities, which were previously known for like particular types of cuisine have now just expanded across everything where like it's I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing or neither, but you know, chefs are sort of like moving around and whatever and taking up different things. And so like where previously you might have been able to find like great Mexican food, but not a nice slice of pizza, now you can kind of find mostly everything. And at least in LA, New York, Miami, probably San Francisco and a few others. So I think we've roughly covered the bases on food talk. Tell me a little bit about basketball, what you're playing in a league.
Yeah. So I play in a rec league, actually on two different teams. One of them is a bunch of guys who I've been playing with for basically since I came to California about 10 years ago. I've mainly played outdoor hoops with these guys. And I didn't realize that they were running a team in the same league. I had been gone for a handful of years in San Francisco, and I had a friend who had invited me to play in a different league. This was like in 2017. So I hadn't really thought anything of it. I had some other friends who I play with say, "Hey, why don't you join our team here? We're really good." I was like, "Okay, that sounds interesting." And then game one, I show up, had no idea, and we're facing my friends who I've known for like 10 years. I'm like, "Wow, this is an interesting introduction to this league." So I kind of split the baby on it, and so now in a Monday Tuesday league, I play with my old friends. Wednesday Thursday, I play with more of what I'll categorize as my new friends. And then I'll also just kind of play in some pickup games with buddies where we just rent out a gym and 15 guys type of thing. You're just running up and down the court for a couple hours, a lot of laughs, and good competitive nature, things like that. So it's basketball is one of those things that kind of keeps me sane. I've never been the kind of person who's going to go take a 5-10 mile run or at least in recent years, not really like a grind it out at the gym for a couple hours. But if we're sitting at the gym playing some hoops, I'm in to play for 2 hours and just wear yourself out and have a great time doing it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot of ball for 4 days plus a week. Is it a year round this season, or it comes and goes?
It comes and goes. They do seasons by the seasons within the year. So right now, we are technically in the winter season, and then we'll do spring, summer, fall, and then it's kind of in a constant loop. And there's like a little couple week break in between them all. But yeah,
Okay, but you can
something
pretty
just
much
fun.
go year round if you want. Like it's not like a ton of dead time between seasons.
No, yeah, it's couple weeks, maybe around the holidays. There were about 3 weeks just as end of
Right.
year and things like that. But for the most part, it's more or less year round.
Yeah, I think I got to get involved in something like that. I've been this is my second year doing coaching, as you've seen a little bit in the feed,
Yeah.
and I honestly probably enjoy that more than playing. Like I really enjoy playing, but coaching has been really awesome. And playing wise, like I played in high school, college was here and there, but not a whole lot. And
Mhm.
then after that, like didn't play at all for a while, like years, really. Maybe like once or twice a year, I'd find a pickup game like randomly or something, but like nothing consistent. And then just basically since I started when I coached, like not this past winter, but the one before that, sort of reignited the basketball passion a little bit. And once the coaching season ended, I was like, all right, maybe I can play while I'm not coaching, and was able to find a local pickup game, which is like really solid. I mean, you're talking about like 15 guys play for 2 hours. Like it's good. But there's something a little different when it's real. Like, there's officiating, there's a scoreboard, it's timed. Like it's just levels up the competitiveness a little bit, which I personally enjoy a lot. Like it's fun to play regardless, but I like sort of like, winning and losing. And everything like that. And playing with a consistent team against other teams is cool. So maybe I'll find my season of coaching just ended, so maybe I'll find
Okay.
another. Maybe I'll find something a little bit more legit this year to play in a league around here. I mean, I'm sure Miami's got, so could probably find it.
Uh, Definitely. And I feel like half the battle is just finding that right group of people, like I feel like it's basketball is a very social thing where, okay, I want to like the people who I'm playing with, but also everybody kind of understands the game, plays it the right way, competitive, but playing under control and playing smart and things like that. And so I think that's what's great is that, you've got people who you're all competing hard and trying to win, but at the end of the day, they're not making silly, reckless plays like coming up under you on a jumper or,
Right.
just kind of like swinging below you under the rim as you go up for a rebound. So I think it's that kind of thing where it's nice to have a group that is a little more reliable and you just kind of what you're getting into a bit. Everybody's just playing in a good flow state and intelligently.
Did you play in high school or college or anything like that?
I played in high school. I played basketball for a little in high school, and then I ended up playing some football in high school. And then just from, the really ever since then, to varying degrees, just playing pickup ball and just with different groups for the most part. And with kind of the exception of San Francisco, I had a couple of friends who liked to play. And so we just kind of show up at an outdoor court and play some pickup, or the name of the app is escaping me, where you could hop in on pickup games, and it was only available in like New York and San Francisco at the time. But that was kind of an interesting little app as well. But I never really had that community, and so it was never consistent. Like now, playing a few days a week, and having some buddies where afterwards you go and grab a bite, or you're just chatting about life and things too. So I think that makes it really fun.
Yeah. And so on the work side, like, at the top of the conversation, you mentioned like being into investing for a long time, well before getting into crypto and stuff. Are you like professionally working in investing, or it's just a hobby?
Yeah, just a hobby. Just a hobby. I've worked in sales for a long time. For the better part of 10 years, I was working in fintech software sales. Prior to that, I worked in banking for a little bit. I kind of pivoted just about a year ago to different financial sales, but never professionally on the investing side of things. It's one of those things where you look back sometimes and think like, oh, I should have just maybe done the Series 7 and the 66 and kind of grind out that path. But I don't have any regrets. I've been lucky to be able to invest some of my own money, and it's something that I've really enjoyed. And I'm lucky that I came from a middle class family, but that was something that my dad was very financially literate, and so he was able to just pass down a little bit of that knowledge, and that kind of sparked me. And it's been something that I really greatly enjoy doing.
And has it become progressively more crypto oriented over the last few years, or are you still doing, like you said, equities and other stuff, and just kind of keeping it more conservative or traditional?
I think the funny thing about my portfolio is that I think most crypto people would look at it and be like, "Oh, you're conservative," and most normal people would look at it and be like, "You're insane."
Yeah, that's crazy. That's my line. Like, that's what I tell people when.
Oh, no kidding.
It's on the same exact way. Yeah, and I honestly think it's the move, because like,
agreed.
Both sides think you're crazy, but like I think you're right. So
yeah, it's that perfect barbell, and for me it was really having conviction in Bitcoin to start, and then I think as the last cycle came to a close, and you're kind of figuring out, okay, where do I want to keep my chips? Where do I want to stack my chips moving forward? In my mind, Bitcoin had solidified itself as the store of value, as the digital gold narrative, and so I felt pretty comfortable allocating to Bitcoin pretty heavy. Versus when you look at some of the L1s, I felt like a lot of that was unsettled, and so I kind of chose to take, I guess, pretty significant positions in Ethereum and Solana, and then have kind of gone down the risk curve on each of those respective chains a bit as well. But always kind of with that core Bitcoin position that, it's kind of easy to say now, oh yeah, of course that was going to flush out. But, a couple of years ago, everybody was talking ultrasound money, and Bitcoin was kind of sitting there very quiet for a long time. So it's been quite the journey, but I'm pretty happy where we are right now, and definitely looking to continue investing this way.
Do you like? I generally am aligned with like all that. I have a feeling we probably align like pretty thoroughly on all this, but I was gonna ask, how do you like a market cap weighted approach for, something like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, if you want to add any others in there? Do you like that sort of like allocation is from like a risk reward perspective, or would you rather do you like to, some of the lesser market cap versus Bitcoin, like an Ethereum, Solana, like a lot of people, I would say probably one of the more popular allocations from people who I think would also describe themselves like you and I being like relative, pretty conservative in crypto. I think even people who describe themselves that way, a lot of times you'll find they're like 50-50 Bitcoin, Ethereum, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a leaning on like one of those directions or the other or something else?
So personally, I like to have majority Bitcoin. So if I were to kind of give like percentage wise, let's call it something in the neighborhood of 60 to probably between 60 to 70%, maybe right around 65% Bitcoin. And then
that's pretty sorry to interrupt, but that's
no,
pretty
no.
market cap weighted. I think
Yeah.
I don't watch it every day, but I think Bitcoin dominance is in the neighborhood of 60%, and also the long tail accounts for a good amount of, like, I don't know what it is, maybe 20 or 25%. And you're obviously not going to like sort of allocate the full long tail. So it makes sense to be above the dominance. So it sounds like you're like right around that level. I mean, not that you are, and none of this is investment advice, but that's what we're talking about basically.
Yeah. I would say I'm pretty close when it comes to Bitcoin. And then, if we just kind of take blanket exposure, including some of the meme coins and just different tokens within their particular ecosystems, the balance is pretty closely split between Solana and Ethereum. I think Solana is maybe takes up a slightly bigger portion of my portfolio, and it's grown into that. Originally it was heavier Ethereum, but then obviously Solana had a really strong 18 months or a couple years, depending on the time frame we're looking at. It's obviously grown its portion in my portfolio, and I'm kind of the opinion, there's a price where I probably will unload a decent portion of my Solana, but as of right now, I'm pretty comfortable with where my allocations are.
And yeah, that all makes sense. Are there other categories within investing, whether it's like stocks or like anything unusual or, real estate or anything like that appeals to you or even piques your interest, maybe not for now, but like down the road? Or you kind of like crypto and tech stocks and sticking with that area?
You know what? I try to keep an open mind to that kind of stuff. And I worked in the commercial real estate industry for about 5 years or so at one of those fintech stops. And I think that there's interesting investments with commercial real estate, especially residential. I think, of course, you could make the case for buying yourself a home, putting your roots down in a nice area with a good location. Commercial wise, I think there's something there. For me, it's one of those things where if I'm looking out 5-10 years, and I'm always thinking about Bitcoin as chasing down gold for right, wrong, or indifferent. And so as I apply Bitcoin's price to the market cap of gold, it just starts to get difficult to parse out your investments that deeply. It's hard to say, oh, I want to get a 7% return on, and I shouldn't laugh like that, because that's the kind of things people do at the top, if you will. But okay, I'm making a 7%, a 10% cash on cash return on my commercial real estate, but then you're dealing with all these different headaches and expenses along the way. So I think one of the things that I find to be very intriguing about crypto is that I actually think, even though a lot of people like to really actively manage their portfolios, I think if you buy things that you have conviction in, and not like unreasonable conviction, like I've been buying some dick butt, but I'm not like thinking about dick butt 5 or 10 years from now, you know? So that's a lottery ticket. And dick butt, I'm buying a lottery ticket. Like I just think we all need to be a little bit honest about it, you know? And
Right.
I think a lot of people are, but I also think a lot of people probably over allocate to micro caps and memes, just thinking, oh, I need to make it next week. I need to make it next year versus just kind of playing the long game, which I think is, in my opinion, is the better approach.
Yeah, and also to your point, it's like you can try to play these day by day, hour by hour, week by week, whatever games, and you can do maybe well, but most people it seems like don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like for what cost? Like the how active you have to be, how like terminally online you have to be. There's definitely like a very real cost to that. Like to your point on real estate, I was thinking about this, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Like I sort of sat down and I was on a plane actually. So it's like a nice opportunity to unplug and just think and like write a little bit. And I was just thinking from like the highest level possible, because I personally am of the opinion that investing is like an extremely personal thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like that, there's not like a one size fits all like good advice. And so, like for example, I think with something like Bitcoin, even, you and I both agree, long term, obviously, long term, it has been a great investment, and I think you and I both agree, like long term, it will continue to be, or
Mm-hmm.
it's most likely, will continue to be that it's a good bet. Not to guarantee that it'll succeed or whatever, but
Oh,
even
yeah, of
with
course
all of
not.
that, I think for certain people, like it's a very volatile ride with Bitcoin, let alone crypto more broadly. And I think for certain people, um, like that ride may not be worth the returns if you're the
Yep.
type of person who will get like sort of like really depressed when things are down, or just like way too addicted to checking things in a way that's like very unhealthy, like checking prices. And like, a lot, I myself check prices like quite a bit and whatever. It's just like sort of but for me, it's like, it feels like kind of like a mostly innocent little habit. Part of why I gave up I'm trying to give up my phone though.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for other people, like the bear market is like really dark and the bull market isn't even like fun. It's just like kind of temporary relief or something. And if that's like your emotional predisposition or something, like I think, maybe you allocate a small percentage or something, but it's just like not worth it. Because like, what's that stopping you from? Like that might be stopping you from enjoying your life more broadly, even financially speaking. It might be blocking you from going and like, I don't know, starting a company or something because you're so attached to like you're depressed from this volatile, net worth that you're holding or whatever. And like you don't go and do another thing that could have made you a bunch of money if you're just talking about it from like a financial perspective. But obviously there's just like the well-being of it as well. So I think it's like a very, very personal thing. And so anyway, I was thinking about this stuff, as it relates for me myself, like what are the things that I like, what don't I like, what makes sense for me. And what really came out of that exercise was the um, the importance of liquidity and passiveness. Basically liquidity versus illiquidity and passive versus active investing, and to actually define both of those things for myself, rather than sort of listen to their traditional definitions. Because traditionally speaking, you know, investing in real estate, if you get like say you're doing residential real estate and you get a property manager that you're given 10% or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like it's that is known as a passive investment. Like people, that's considered a passive investment. But I did that with a buddy out of school, and we just bought a little house in Kentucky where he was from, and it worked out well. It was a good learning experience and everything. But I could tell you, like, we had a property manager. It was not passive. Like, it's not a ton of work, but it's not, pressing a buy button on Coinbase.
Yep.
And so, like, there are really like both, passive versus active, liquid versus illiquid. These are not black and white, 0 or 1 things. These are spectrums, and it's really worth thinking about, like, sort of what matters to what you like. Like if you want to be actively investing, great. Like then those opportunities are interesting. But if you want to be passive and long term, and passive doesn't necessarily mean like you're not doing anything, but it, from my perspective, means you don't have to do anything. You can choose to sort of like, do things at times that make sense for you, like reassess your portfolio at times that make sense for you, make long-term bets at times that make sense for you, but you're not going to get pulled into like, dealing with a tenant who got, kicked out or whatever, like all these, or, they ran the bath and there's a flood in the house or whatever it is. And so basically I sort of came out of that and I was like, same as you're saying, like, it's like, man, Bitcoin is pretty compelling. Like it's the most passive thing ever. The returns have been great. I expect them, I'm also looking at it as something where like, the probability that it, gets to roughly a gold market cap and, potentially beyond, or maybe a little bit short, but like probably doesn't just like top out where it is now or are pretty high. And so it's like, it does make a lot of other things kind of hard to justify when they're all like sort of by definition going to be more active or more or less liquid. Like even stocks, this is another sort of thing that like when I talked about, thinking through these concepts for yourself rather than just taking the definitions, like everyone would consider a stock to be liquid. But practically speaking, crypto's open all day, every day, and the stock market is not. And then like another thing actually was, I forget what I called these things, but I called them like, I think literal liquidity and practical liquidity. And so like on a literal liquidity perspective, crypto is like maximally literally liquid. Like you can buy and sell at any time. And stocks are like pretty close, but not quite, as literally liquid. But from a practical liquidity perspective, I might actually like give the nod to stocks, because with the way that crypto has moved historically with these like sort of, roughly speaking, 1 year bull run and 3 year, bear market, from a practical perspective, it's kind of not wise typically to sell for 3 out of 4 years. And so like, that's actually not that much time where it's like practically liquid. I mean, yeah, practically liquid in terms of like being a good idea to sell. So all these things were sort of, it was a good exercise. I recommend people do this because you can just like listen to stuff that you read on Twitter or like, even investment books by like proper investors like Warren Buffett or whoever you want. Like they might have like great advice, but it's never going to be personalized unless you think about it for yourself.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And, when normally, and I'm sure you've had the same thing where, you might be the crypto guy to some of your friends who, haven't maybe have dipped a toe in or maybe haven't gotten it at all. And all the time it's, does this look good here? What do you think about this? And it's, it's always a very vague question. It's like, do you think Solana is a good buy here? A good buy for when? Are you going to hang on to this for 3 months, for 6 months, for 6 years? Is this money that you might need to dive into this summer if an unforeseen event happens, or is this something where you're content just to watch this for 5 years? What's your risk appetite? There's 100 different questions, and to your point, it's all very personal. It's like I can't put my risk tolerance onto somebody else, because it's going to drive them crazy if exactly what you were saying a short time ago here is they're watching prices fluctuate. That might be something that I'm somewhat comfortable with, I'll say, versus, it could drive someone else who's not accustomed to that insane. So I think you're 100% right. It's all about kind of knowing yourself and, having those parameters in place and just getting comfortable with how you want to invest, where you want to invest, and just making sure that you understand your own duration, your own liquidity, your own investment strategy. And I think, hopefully a lot of people are doing that, but my feeling is that there's a lot of people more shooting from the hip too, if you will.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, that example that you brought up, definitely I've had that countless times. And, the reality of like the best way to address that, I think, is basically if however many times you get that question, if you get it from someone like you're not that close with, then it's just, you can kind of give like sort of a a non-answer or something, and if you get it from someone you're really close with, and you want to, you know, you think your perspective like could be helpful or whatever, you think you might have a little like, you know, a good idea of what you're doing, at least in crypto, and could maybe be helpful in just sharing your perspective, then they can make their own decisions. And then you basically pick up the phone and have at least like a half hour to an hour call going into all of like the different nuances of the considerations, and, you know, asking those sorts of questions that you were saying, like, you know, make the difference in the answer. And then ultimately you're not making a recommendation, you're just sort of providing a bunch of context, sharing your perspective, and then the decisions are up to them. Like, I remember, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, or maybe it was longer than that. I don't really remember when it was, but at the time, Bitcoin was like maybe 35 or 37,000 or something like that, and it had just like ripped from like 26 or something, which,
Yep.
you know, like 30% or something in like a week. And
Mm-hmm.
my buddy, like independent of that, he had just, you know, like got a bonus or something, and so it wasn't like he was just paying attention because it was hot all of a sudden. It was, he had just had a little money, wanted to invest,
Mm-hmm.
and was asking me like if, you know, if I thought like putting, you know, X into Bitcoin at that time was a good thing. And I was like, um, you know, generally speaking, long term, definitely, you know, still believe Bitcoin's a great bet, but it just ripped 30% this week. And like, it's really hard for me to ever tell someone to buy that. Like, it's just, the likelihood is usually like it'll, you know, has a 30% up week. It might be followed by a 10% down week or a 20% down week or whatever. And might be a while before it gets back to this level or whatever, but like long term, I think it's good. And so like having that conversation, and then, you know, and then it's like, well, you know, if you want to sort of equalize that a little bit, or like neutralize that short-term action, you can dollar cost average in a bit, and maybe, you know, you pick how much you want to invest, or decide how much you want to invest, and then you put, you know, half of it in now and half of it in next month, or, you know, 4 installments or whatever. Like, you sort of go over those options, and then they decide for themselves. Like, fortunately, my buddy did end up allocating at that time, or around, you know, I don't know if he did it all at once or a couple buys or whatever. And like, you know, sure enough, it turned out great. And I don't think it actually did take like, I don't think it ever did take that like near term haircut at that time, but
Mm-hmm.
it very well could have. And then it's like, man, like, you know, Jake told me to buy, and then it, you know, I could have bought it 20K like 2 weeks later, something like that. It's like, you
Yeah.
never want to be that guy. So it's the tough part is that it just does require, it's a lot of personal like elements to it. It's a lot of context. It's a lot of what you don't know, and then talk about like the few things that you, not that you know, but you have pretty high conviction in, and then ultimately like deferring the decision to them, but feeling like you were able to provide a lot of like sort of valuable perspective, basically.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect approach, and it sounds like in a very similar manner. You do not like trying to give short term advice. I hate trying to give short term advice. It's just, you know, no one here has a crystal ball, or we'd all be rich. And so to try to tell you where Bitcoin's going to be in 6 weeks or 3 months, it's like I don't know. I can try to, you know, put my finger in the air and give you an idea of what I think, but at the end of the day, it's worth exactly what you pay for it, which is nothing. Um, and so I think that's the smarter way to go about it, is just try to arm people the best you can. I used to talk to people a lot about portfolio allocation. This was more around maybe 2020, 2021, where I had some friends who were dabbling and they're making money on random altcoins, and I was kind of saying, okay, well, here's how I think about it, with Bitcoin being my dominant position, and because I feel so strongly about its narrative with digital gold, I personally do not have an interest in XRP. I don't have an interest in Litecoin. I personally do not have an interest in Doge. And then just kind of extrapolating from there, that okay, I want to have strong exposure to L1s. ETH is the main player. Solana looks like an upstart that's interesting. You know, just being able to intelligently put together a portfolio versus just kind of throwing darts at a board, on what the flavor of the week is and things like that. Which, hey, more power to you if you can hit the short term stuff and keep your money. But similar to what you mentioned earlier, my feeling is that it's a very low percentage of people who are really doing well that way.
Are there any categories that you feel like similarly strongly about? Like, I mean, obviously, digital gold is your number one. Sort of like, who's going to be the dominant L1 or what are going to be the top two or three L1s?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's number two. Like one that I had when I first got into crypto was I thought that there would be like one of the top, 10 coins ultimately would be a privacy coin, like a
Sure.
Zcash or a Monero or something like
Yeah.
that. At the time, I thought Zcash, and it just never came to fruition. Maybe it will, but I got a little bit tired of waiting. I have a little bit
Yeah.
of Zcash, but that was like sort of a category that I always thought, because it was my rationale was digital gold with privacy, and like
Sure.
that's I think very legitimate. Bitcoin is not private. And so like I think there could be a private sort of competitor, that not that it's going to like beat Bitcoin or anything, but for people who care a little bit more about privacy or whatever, then I think that was well warranted. Again, hasn't really played out. Then I think you could take a position that maybe like the leading exchange is worth, like Uniswap
Yep.
or whatever it might be. Do you have any of those sorts of categories where A, you like the category, and B, you feel like the power law winner has sort of been established, or nothing like really close to as strong as the store of the digital gold and the L1 sort of concept?
I wish that I had as strong of a feeling on a more niche topic that maybe wasn't quite as developed. I'm not sure that I do. Um, I have recently been buying a Jupiter position. I like what Jupiter's done. I think they've got a very interesting exchange. Some part of my thesis, I think a lot of people on Farcaster maybe are not a big fan of Solana, and that's okay. Solana, you don't have to participate in every chain or every meta or anything like that. I personally see a lot of promise with Solana, and I think that from a development standpoint, it is continuing to move in the right direction. So I like Jupiter as a platform. They announced a buyback, which can be a little borderline scammy at times when things like that are happening. But my feeling was that they perceived their token to be undervalued, and that's the reason why they're really doing that. And so that's one that I have an interest in. I personally, and this is kind of gonna strike a similar chord to your privacy coins. I love NFTs. I like to collect art, physical and digital, and so I've kind of been anxiously waiting for another NFT season, if you will. It really has not come to fruition yet. And, that's kind of point that's kind of neither here nor there, but that's really kind of been, to me, the story of subsectors within crypto. Is if you look at DeFi, if you look at NFTs, now we've got meme coins. There hasn't really been a huge part two wave for any of those yet. So I think we need to kind of improve the technology. We need to make it more appealing for folks. There's 100 different reasons why, but for me, there's something about NFTs that is just stuck from the get go. And so I haven't. I've got some ones from Ethereum that you could probably categorize as historical NFTs if you wanted to, but it's the kind of thing where in my head I sort of mark to zero in my portfolio. I try not to attribute a portfolio value because it's so murky. This stuff's either going to be worth 100 ETH or zero, and I'm not really sure which one it's going to be. And if we're just being honest with ourselves, it's probably much more highly likely to be zero. But it's an area that I still find to be interesting, and I'm hoping that the next iteration of NFTs is going to be improved on somewhere in crypto.
Yeah, I do think that I'm generally very bullish on NFTs. Any individual project, I'm not sure. I don't really have conviction in particular projects necessarily. Like if I had to pick one, probably CryptoPunks,
Yeah.
just the OG.
Yep.
But like it almost got flipped by Pudgy Penguins earlier this year, and
Yeah.
Pudgy Penguins has a team with like they're pretty categorically different. Where CryptoPunks isn't claiming to do anything. It's almost like Bitcoin versus like Solana or something, where CryptoPunks isn't like trying to do anything new or different. Like it just is what it is, and you like it or you don't.
Yep.
And Pudgy is like out there like actively proliferating gifts and building, the like whatever, making the, I forget what you call them, like the little stuffed animal sort of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, they're out in retail. They got their token. They're doing a little bit of everything. I think that's
Yeah.
actually a very interesting way to analogize CryptoPunks versus something like Pudgy Penguins. And I think if you pushed me to say, hey, give me an NFT, and again, I'm not saying anything profound here. I've so far as we've chatted, I've proclaimed my love for the number one cryptocurrency asset by a wide margin, and now we're kind of doing the same on punks. But if you just had to say, hey, which of these is going to have staying power for 5 or 10 years? I've got the money to just plow into one of them. I would also say punks. I just think, the meaningfulness from a historical standpoint, the scarcity, the demand from crypto native people. I still view that as the top dog, and I don't personally think they need to. I don't think they need to add anything, and I think that's actually. I haven't watched what Yuga's done since they bought the IP closely enough to comment too much on it, but I personally do not think CryptoPunks needs a token or needs, some special universe a la whatever the Bored Ape universe is. Its name's escaping me right now. Other Side.
Yeah.
So some of that stuff might end up being very fruitful. It could be that might be the next iteration of NFTs that we're talking about. But for me, I think just the digital identity standpoint is very interesting. And I think Gary V, you might be familiar with the interview from, I don't know, 21 or 22, where he kind of likened it to how you express yourself as a person. So like people say all the time to me, oh, well, why would I buy, I could right click and save this. It's 10 grand, whatever it is. And it's okay. Why did you buy a Mercedes? Why do you have a Chanel bag? I can go to Ross and get a bag for $50 and it's made of leather, And so I think when you make easy analogies like that, I think people get it. Whether or not they want to spend 10 grand on a PFP remains to be seen. But I think it just it's communicating in the digital world who you are as a person. And so I think for that reason, it's not going to go away and it will become bigger. It's just a matter of when, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think my version of like the leather bag thing is, a Timex tells the time just as well as a Rolex, but people still like to buy Rolex. So it's, I think, a similar thing where it's just really about like social signaling and status and all that. And I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but one of the bigger like sort of things underlying my conviction in NFTs is just I think fundamentally they're collectibles, and the market share for like the NFT, like all NFTs combined market cap just is nothing compared to the like the market cap, if you will, of basically all collectibles, whether that's, sports cards or art or whatever else, stamps and coins and whatever. And it's like, I forget what it is, it's roughly on the order of maybe 99% to 1% or something. And like, I just don't see a world in which that remains 99% to 1% as the world continues to become more digital. People spend more of their time in the digital world. And like, I'm not talking about even like, you don't need to have a headset and like be in the metaverse all day. It's just how much time are people spending on the combination of their computer and their phone these days? It's like a lot of times, more than half the day of their waking hours. So I think that should become closer. I don't know if it's gonna be 50-50 or 80-20 in one direction or the other, but regardless, like I don't think it's gonna be 99 to 1. So and the other thing is, like, as we've seen, like, even you look at the market cap of all tokens, like fungible tokens, meme coins, but also, like actual, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever. Like that is so much greater than the market cap of all the NFTs. And to me, it's like the question becomes, is there something so like is non-fungibility like this insane negative value, or are they not properly like sort of priced against each other? And it could be that actually like fungibility is way more valuable because it makes it like way more liquid or something like that. But I generally think like there is value to difference. And I think, I don't know, maybe like if I were to speculate on what could be the next like sort of unlock for NFTs, I really have no idea. But two things that sort of would make sense, at least to me, would be one, a little more sort of like confidence and certainty in which chain is going to like persist as the home for some of the main collections. So like right now, I think that would still probably be Ethereum, like mainnet, but you know, the L1, but um, it could, you know, it could be Solana, it could be Base, it could be something else. And I think there's just like not a ton of confidence right now. And if you don't have confidence in, for example, you know, Ethereum, that people are going to continue to transact there, even if it's just infrequently for these like blue chip NFTs or whatever, then it's pretty hard to justify, you know, paying whatever that is for one of these NFTs on Ethereum. And if and as like sort of consensus develops around, okay, this is sort of where the NFTs are going to mainly be, then I think that could be helpful, at least for that ecosystem of NFTs. And then the other thing would be like, you know, last cycle, it was like the NFTs that became popular were pretty much all these PFP collections, and that's fine. And I think it makes sense. And it's, you know, in a world where everyone has a profile picture, like that's what do people see of you first on the internet? It's like whatever post they're stumbling upon, your profile picture and your username. So like those are kind of the most important things. So it makes sense. But I think ultimately everyone sort of envisions that NFTs should actually be like, you know, more interoperable. They should be like usable in games or like other environments, and you know, ultimately like some sort of metaverse type thing or something like that. Maybe we end up doing like more VR meetings versus Zoom calls, and you can, you know, buy a certain skin or whatever, and like all these things. I think we're just not quite there yet on that stuff. But as we're doing more interesting things on the internet, I think NFTs only will become more interesting, like you said, for basically being able to just express yourself in terms of your digital identity.
Yeah, I think you made a great point right at the top there in just kind of comparing, because I would do the same thing. I would call NFTs art, collectibles. You know, we can get into subcategory, but I think collectibles is the proper place where they sit, and just, you know, comparing the digital world to the physical world and just kind of seeing the broader trend within the world today. And, you know, I think we need to figure out more of a happy medium from a scarcity approach, because I think recently we've seen kind of Zora have a quick moment. We've seen Rodeo Club proliferate a bit on Farcaster. You know, I'm just not sure that it's necessarily the best way to collect. I'm highly skeptical that it's best for artists. So I think you know, I think we need to figure out what chain it's going to make the most sense on for artists and collectors, and also kind of just finding a happy medium where, you know, I probably don't want to spend $200 on gas anymore for NFTs, but I also don't want to buy someone's work that I really love for 30 cents. And unless, you know, unless we figure out an economic model where that makes sense for an artist. But my feeling is that is not really the case right now. So it's I think that's part of the reason why we're in a little bit of a rough patch in the NFT world.
Yeah, I'm extremely biased, but I like a lot of elements of Base Colors, which is really the only NFT collection that I've launched. I wasn't even really like last cycle sort of came and went, and I never really got into the NFT stuff. I mean, I followed along and I thought it was interesting, and I was long-term bullish, but you know, generally didn't like pick a project. Likelihood is I thought it would probably go to zero again with some, you know, I knew that it wouldn't all, and if I had to pick one, probably like CryptoPunks or whatever. But in general, like thought most of the stuff that was popular would crash, and most of it has. Maybe some of it'll come back, whatever. But wasn't like super in NFTs. But I just always thought that colors on the internet were an existing collection with a finite number of them through like hex codes, and they're like super interoperable, which I think is one of the most underexplored like advantages of crypto. Like once in a while you see something that's like pretty elegantly interoperable, where something is sort of like coming in from another app that you didn't expect to be where it is, and you're like the other day I was reading a blog post on Paragraph, which is this crypto native blog platform or whatever, and like I got to the bottom of the blog post, and the comment section was like powered by Farcaster. Basically, it was like pulling in comment, like I guess the author of the post had shared it on Farcaster, and then Paragraph is pulling in the comments on that cast, like the replies to that cast, as comments when you read it on Paragraph. And I'm like, that's the type of stuff that I like. So anyway, the interoperability of color. So it's a long-term thing. We'll see what happens with it. It was fun. I grinded on it really hard for a few months, and then have been working on it as more of like, I think it's ultimately gonna plug in as like something that I work on in spurts over the long haul, but we'll see. But I think we haven't really yet seen, like to your point, there was, you pay, $30 for gas or whatever to buy this ultra expensive NFT, which kind of has to be at least pretty expensive, because otherwise, why are you going to pay $30 of gas for a $5 NFT or whatever? And that was on, mainnet Ethereum. And then with like the newer gen, with the Zoras and the Rodeos and whatever, like, gas is basically free. And so you've got these like 30-cent NFTs. And I think there's a place for that where it's more of just, it's kind of like a like button at a certain point. And so like, maybe there's a space for that. I think they're still sort of like iterating both of those. I'm not as familiar with Rodeo, but I know Zora's, still sort of like iterating on some of the stuff. But we haven't really seen, like, I don't think L2, whether it's Base or something else, or even Solana, like sort of cheap gas NFTs, we haven't really seen like a categorically different kind of NFTs that has succeeded anywhere near the level that like sort of the initial winner of super expensive PFPs on Ethereum succeeded. So we'll see what happens. Maybe it's in the year to come, maybe it's longer term, maybe it never happens. But I think NFTs are really interesting, and they're just like so far removed from the conversation around crypto right now, that it's just kind of, it always seems like a good time to be thinking about things when like absolutely no one is talking about them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the most difficult part is, we're sitting here with kind of the same idea of expecting digital collectibles to grow as an asset class versus physical collectibles. Now the question is, where do you put your money to be able to realize that thesis? And so I think that's what's difficult is, if we were looking last cycle, a lot of people, say in the institutional world, probably would have said, oh, I'm going to slam some money into OpenSea. They're printing money, their volumes are through the roof. And obviously OpenSea now, I don't know about you, but I don't use OpenSea at all. And so I think it's a difficult subclass of crypto to be able to express an opinion in, because it's so hit or miss and the liquidity is so thin right now. My opinion is that as is kind of classic in crypto, it'll probably be a shiny new thing that catches everybody's attention. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if it is on a Solana or if it is on a Base, a chain with very little gas, how things move, how the market acts if we get another mania of, whether it's one NFT that kicks it off or a broader NFT season. It'll definitely be interesting to see.
Yeah, it is tough. And maybe this is sort of what I was getting at earlier, of like, maybe there is a legitimate, argument to be said that actually fungibility is super valuable relative to non-fungibility. And there's nothing about non-fungibility that is sort of like valuable enough to counter that. Like I don't really believe that, but I think there's an argument for it. And part of it is that like, you can't just I can't just sort of index, you know, put some money into CryptoPunks, put some money into Penguins and Miladies and whatever. Like you have to, the price tags are huge. You have
Yeah.
to buy a unit. You can't buy a fraction. And it's just not as liquid. And like, then you got to pick one and whatever. It's like the easy thing, the passive thing, the sort of winner agnostic thing to do, I think would be if there was basically an index where you could buy a fraction of all of the top, 10 or 100 or whatever it is NFT collections, then like, yeah, I would be bullish on that. Because even if, 7 of them don't make it, like 3 of them will probably be huge or whatever. So like, that's something that I would do, but I don't know how to do that. I don't think that really exists. So it is a
Yeah.
tough one where even if you have the conviction, there's just not really a practical solution for something to invest in.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that does seem like something that would be interesting. It's just a matter um, of putting that together on the back end, where you're pooling these funds, and then once you hit a certain threshold, you're buying at the market, or as people take their money out, you're selling. No, I could definitely, and I think that's a way to let smaller folks get in on NFTs that, just because you don't have a huge portfolio doesn't mean that you're not interested in a quote unquote blue chip NFT, so
Right.
and I would also say I like supporting smaller artists and, my friends and everything else, but from a collector's standpoint, everybody wants to have that crown jewel and things like that too, versus if you're just kind of, throwing some money at today's rodeos or things like that.
Yeah, it's like a patronage versus investment sort of thing, I think. And
Yeah,
some
yeah,
of
I
these
think so
things
too.
are, and there's, patronage, there's like the patronage element, there's like the just for fun element, and then there's, like long-term conviction investing sort of thing. And obviously there's the near-term speculating as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I feel like we've really covered a lot of ground, starting with the food, delving into the basketball, and then an extended conversation on investing, which has been quite enjoyable as well. So I know we're well over on time, but appreciate you taking the time. It's been great to take this conversation from the feed to an extended call, and excited to share it out there for other people to listen as well. So thanks for doing this, and hope to talk again more.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. It's been a lot of fun. There's only so much that you can do back and forth via text on the feed. So have enjoyed interacting with you there, but this has been really cool just to have some back and forth. And yeah, would love to chat again. And please let me know if you find yourself on the West Coast, or I'll drop you a line if I'm coming through Miami, and maybe we share a meal.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll maybe I'll get to have a guest post on the food streak. I don't know how we coordinate that, but you could just give me a hat tip or something in the comments, and I could be a little guest feature on the food pick.
Yeah, there we go. I was gonna say, or I quote cast you or something. We can figure that out.
Yeah, that's a solvable problem. We've talked about some complex things.
Yeah,
That
I
one
think
we can.
that's going to be one of the easier ones to solve that we've been poking at for the last hour or so here.
Exactly. All right, cool. Well, awesome. Thanks again, and we'll talk more soon.
Good deal. Appreciate it, man. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
See
Later.
ya.